A man suddenly found himself transported into his favorite game as nothing more than a minor side character. However, what he did not realize yet was that he had obtained an ability that every man would dream of possessing. There existed a game called Savior Rising, a vibrant academy-themed game filled with cliché storylines, yet its characters felt familiar and well-developed. The day after completing the game, the man mysteriously transmigrated into its world, taking over the identity of the Border Baron's heir, Dodd Campbell. In the game's world, Dodd Campbell was one of the most insignificant supporting characters. The Campbell territory was nothing more than a quiet agricultural region, completely removed from the Empire's prosperity and influence. Today marked Dodd's first day at the Royal Academy. Before his departure, his father repeatedly warned him, emphasizing that he must not cause trouble and reminding him that the Empire was a gathering place for nobles. His father stressed the importance of behaving properly among such powerful figures. Dodd understood this perfectly. Remaining low-key and avoiding attention was absolutely essential for his survival. When he checked his status panel, the result was utterly pitiful. Every attribute was ranked at F grade, the lowest possible level. He possessed no awakened skills and his abilities remained completely undeveloped. As an experienced gamer, Dodd had never seen such disastrously poor attributes before. The game's story began directly at Alfonte Academy, and he knew from experience that ignoring system prompts would result in instant death. The most dangerous threats were the tyrannical villain characters roaming freely throughout the academy. One wrong action could cost him his life. He had promised his father that he would remain invisible and never entertain unrealistic thoughts about improving the family's reputation. After all, the protagonist would handle the main storyline. His only goal was to quietly enjoy academy life and survive peacefully. That had been his plan. However, he now found himself sharing a train compartment with her. She was known as the bloodthirsty Elnor, the same Elnor who stood atop a mountain of corpses, the final boss of the entire world. Elnor Eleanorize. In the original game's story, she clashed with the protagonist repeatedly. Eventually, she suffered a complete mental breakdown, became possessed by a demon, and could only be defeated once the protagonist reached full strength. Noticing his visible discomfort, Elnor calmly explained that her Duke family had intentionally chosen a common compartment in order to appear approachable to others. This shocked Dodd. The Elnor from the game had always been arrogant and dismissive. Yet the person sitting before him now was gentle and composed. Unable to stop himself, Dodd expressed his surprise, remarking that she was unexpectedly kind. Elnor reacted with curiosity, wondering if they had met before. Startled by her reaction, Dodd quickly clarified that he had only heard rumors describing her as strict. Internally, he reminded himself that as a minor character, he needed to minimize any interaction with someone like her. As he stared out the window, lost in thought, disaster suddenly struck. A massive rock came flying directly toward their compartment. Acting purely on instinct, Dodd lunged forward and shielded Elnor. A deafening crash echoed as the rock slammed into the train. Elnor's protective amulet activated instantly, shielding both of them from harm. Dodd realized that he had fallen directly on top of her. Embarrassed, he scrambled away after she reminded him. This had been Elnor's first physical contact with a man, yet she showed no anger. Instead, she believed that Dodd had acted out of genuine concern to protect her. In truth, Dodd had simply wanted to benefit from her protection. Elnor then asked for his name. After a moment of hesitation, Dodd introduced himself properly. She responded by expressing that she would never forget his kindness and that she would repay him someday. At that exact moment, the system issued a notification. He had gained the favor of a villain. The conditions for receiving a special gift had been fulfilled. He had acquired 2 new skills, Desperate Survival and Deadly Charm. Although the train had suffered damage, casualties remained minimal. Dodd was forced to continue his journey to the academy by carriage. He quickly realized why he had been unable to awaken any abilities before. The Campbell territory had contained no villains. Without villains, awakening was impossible. Desperate Survival was an extraordinary ability that instantly increased his stats when his life was in danger. Deadly Charm allowed him to easily gain favor from villains, with stronger effects on individuals possessing more extreme personalities. This ability disturbed him. Every villain in Savior Rising was completely abnormal. There was a fighter whose eyes gleamed with excitement at the mere mention of battle, a madman who drew his sword at the slightest provocation, an assassin who killed purely for money, an emotionless genius magician. Getting involved with any of them would bring nothing but disaster. Even as an experienced gamer, Dodd had never encountered such a situation. Fortunately, he managed to pass through the opening ceremony without incident. However, the academy's teachers found something suspicious. They questioned why Dodd, a mere country noble, had been sharing a train compartment with Elnor. Even more suspicious was the fact that the rock attack could not have been a coincidence. Hearing this, Dodd became determined to avoid her completely. Unfortunately, the system had already bound their fates together. A new notification appeared. The Trust Stage 1 activity related to Elnor had begun its countdown. Dodd understood clearly that Elnor, who would eventually become the Academy's final boss, was far from simple. While he was still processing this, the entrance ceremony's power assessment began. The assessment took place through paired combat matches. Students quickly selected their opponents until only one individual remained unmatched. She was known as the world's strongest genius, Elia Crixanax, the protagonist of Savior Rising. Dodd immediately realized that his situation was hopeless. Meanwhile, rumors spread rapidly among the students. It questioned why Elnor had not yet arrived. Soon after, the bloodthirsty Elnor finally appeared. Beatrix, a member of the student council, demanded an explanation for her lateness. Elnor calmly explained that she had been dealing with assassins who attempted to kill her, stating that she had personally killed 12 of them. She conveyed that handing them over to the academy had been too troublesome, and she had no intention of sparing those who sought her death. Beatrix responded by instructing her to change clothes and prepare for the assessment. Soon it was time for the match between Elia and Dodd. At the mention of Dodd's name, a faint smile appeared on Elnor's lips. At that moment, Dodd had no idea how to approach the battle. Students whispered among themselves, placing bets on how long he would last. Dodd knew the truth. With his pitiful stats, he would likely collapse after a single punch from Elia. Fortunately, desperate survival would activate when his life was threatened. The closer he came to death, the stronger he would become. Combined with deadly charms, surviving would only attract even more villains. Using his knowledge of the game, his chances of survival increased slightly. Elia looked at Dodd and bluntly stated her observation that he appeared extremely weak, expressing that she had initially intended to punch him but now found him too fragile. Confused, Dodd questioned why she would want to attack him at all. Elia openly explained that she hated Elnor and the entire Tristan family. Dodd immediately remembered this detail from the game's story. Elia had always harbored hatred toward the Tristan family. Dodd quickly clarified that he had only happened to share the same train compartment as Lady Elnor. However, this explanation only made Elia more irritated. In that moment, Dodd realized the harsh truth. If he wanted to become stronger quickly, he had only one path forward. He needed to attract villains. To provoke Elia into going all out, he deliberately declared that he liked Elnor. Hearing this, Elia's expression changed drastically. Dodd decided to provoke her even further, stating that the more she hated Elnor, the more he liked her. Hearing those words, Elia became furious and charged at Dodd, breaking his sword with a single strike. Seeing him dodge the first blow, Elia prepared to thrust forward with full force for the second strike. At that moment, the system displayed a prompt, sensing that this danger could be life-threatening. The skill Desperate Survival was upgraded to EX level, acting on pure instinct. Dodd drove his fist forward, his punch connecting squarely with Elia's face. Only afterward did he realize that this was the highest level of the skill. Everyone was stunned. Dodd had sent the genius Elia flying with a single punch. Even he himself could hardly believe it. The students stood dumbfounded. A person with F-level abilities had defeated this world's protagonist on his very first day at the academy. The principal reviewed the duel footage repeatedly. Some believed that Dodd was nothing more than a proficient fraud. However, one professor firmly concluded that the strike was absolutely real. A person with no special abilities or combat techniques had defeated the genius Elia with a single punch, a blow that no one in the academy could withstand, not even the principal himself. Although they did not know what method he had used, no matter how they looked at it, Dodd was a monstrous talent. Some teachers found it difficult to accept this reality. However, since the academy could not afford to lose a talented student, they decided to manage Dodd separately. The next day, Dodd made the newspaper headlines, making him realize that this world was fundamentally the same as his original one. After the practice match, the villain characters had already begun to take notice of him, with the final boss Elnor showing the highest level of interest. As a reward for reaching the trust stage, Dodd obtained the Tristan sword technique. Even stranger, the hero Elia appeared on the system's favor list, leaving him completely puzzled. Elia was not a villain, so he questioned why she would have favor points at all. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Recognizing who it was, Dodd deliberately chose not to open it. Elia's voice came through, sharp and threatening, warning that if he did not open the door, she would break it down herself. Dodd snapped, demanding to know if she had lost her mind and asking what she wanted from him. The hero candidate Elia calmly explained that she simply wanted to get to know him better. Despite this, Dodd still refused to open the door for Elia. On her way back, Elia accidentally bumped into someone, causing the other person's snack bag to instantly fall to the ground. She immediately apologized and bent down to pick it up, only to discover that the person she had bumped into was Elnor Showing. To her surprise, Elnor Showing did not reproach her at all and instead asked with concern whether she was hurt. Elia found herself gazing at Elnor Showing's face as unpleasant memories flooded her mind like a rising tide. In her heart, every member of the Tristan family was an enemy. Her body trembled slightly on its own, and without realizing it, her hand had already gripped the hilt of her sword. Elnor merely extended her hand calmly, gesturing for the return of the snack bag. Elia found it difficult to understand. Despite clearly seeing her grip the sword, Elnor Showing displayed no sign of caution whatsoever. Elia concluded that Elnor was looking down on her, and she could not comprehend what kind of connection might exist between Dodd and Elnor. While returning the snack bag, Elia calmly informed Elnor that Dodd's room was located to the right. Upon hearing this, Elnor's expression instantly darkened, and she demanded to know why Elia knew the location of Dodd's room and what purpose she had for seeking him. Feeling the oppressive aura pressing down on her, Elia explained that it was merely routine communication between freshmen. Elnor then seriously warned her, stating that relationships between members of the opposite sex were forbidden among freshmen. Elia expressed her confusion, stating that she had no recollection of any such school rule. Eleanor proudly declared that it was a new regulation she had just established as the student council president, warning Elia once again not to approach Dowd's room. When Elia questioned what kind of relationship Eleanor had with Dowd, Eleanor firmly denied having any connection to him, emphasizing once more that Elia should remember and abide by the school rules. However, Elia recalled what Dowd had declared during their practice match, that the more she hated Eleanor, the more he liked her. Those words convinced her that there was undoubtedly some form of connection between the two. Determined to gather more information, she resolved to get even closer to Dowd. Soon the class assignment exam finally arrived. Having defeated the hero candidate, Dowd was placed in the top-tier squad, yet his biggest concern was that Elia continued to pursue him relentlessly. The system panel showed that her curiosity toward him was constantly increasing. Just the day before, Dowd had inexplicably received a bag of snacks along with a letter of encouragement. He suspected that someone had been secretly observing him. However, the more urgent matter was the upcoming class assignment exam. These minor suspicions would have to be set aside for the time being. Meanwhile, Eleanor's information panel indicated that her trust level had reached the second stage and related activities were about to be triggered. The person placed in charge of overseeing the class assignment exam was none other than Eleanor herself. From this, Dowd deduced that events connected to her would undoubtedly occur during the exam. This arrangement had been collectively decided by the Academy's teachers. Because Dowd had defeated the hero candidate, the Academy held high expectations for his performance and had specifically appointed Eleanor to supervise the entire examination process. Eleanor led a group of students into the examination venue, only for the entrance to suddenly become sealed. The interior was instantly swallowed by darkness. Elia voiced her inquiry about what was happening, yet no explanation was given. Dowd understood immediately that this was no ordinary exam. It was a trap. A system prompt appeared at once. Eleanor-related activity has begun. Assassins are attempting to eliminate Eleanor. Please ensure her protection. Dowd quickly scanned his surroundings and realized that the composition of the group was highly unusual. Every person present was a member of the game's protagonist party. According to the original storyline, this should have been their first official meeting, and each of them possessed extraordinary abilities. After a brief moment of contemplation, Dowd suggested that everyone relocate to the central hall, explaining that it contained first aid supplies and equipment and would be less vulnerable to ambush than their current position. His words subtly implied that Eleanor must have already sensed the presence of enemies nearby. Shortly afterward, Dowd stated that he needed to investigate another direction on his own. Elia immediately questioned why he intended to act alone. With a serious expression, Dowd responded that there were important reasons he could not disclose at the moment, assuring everyone that he would provide an explanation when the time was right. In truth, the so-called important reason was nothing more than his desire to preserve his own life. Dowd had not expected the others to accept his proposal so easily. Perhaps defeating the hero candidate had earned him their trust. Now his plan was simple: find a safe place to hide and wait until Eleanor's event concluded. After all, the assassin's true target was Eleanor. Just then, an unfamiliar voice called out from behind him. The man introduced himself as an electrician who had come to repair the circuits and asked Dowd to guide him to the control area. At that exact moment, the system issued an urgent prompt warning that imminent danger had been detected. Meanwhile, on the other side, after Dowd separated from the group, the remaining members exchanged confused glances. None of them understood why he had been allowed to act alone. Before they could analyze his intentions further, a group of shadowy figures silently surrounded them. At the same time, Dowd continued leading the so-called electrician through the corridor. The advanced assassination squad sent to eliminate Eleanor had already been completely wiped out, so their leader had chosen to act personally. By chance, he encountered Dowd wandering alone. Judging him with the discerning eye of a professional assassin, he concluded that Dowd was merely a harmless rookie. His plan was simple: eliminate Dowd first, then assume his identity to approach the true target, Eleanor. However, just as he tore off his human skin disguise and prepared to strike, Dowd unexpectedly let out a quiet sigh of relief, remarking that it was indeed Hafmid. The assassin, having his name spoken aloud, was instantly shocked. Dowd calmly stated that if the opponent had been just some random expert, the situation would have been truly dangerous. Seeing Hafmid exactly as he had anticipated, however, was actually reassuring. Most importantly, desperate survival had already activated. Hafmid could not comprehend Dowd's words at all and immediately resolved to eliminate this arrogant rookie as quickly as possible. Elsewhere, the assassins who had surrounded Eleanor and Elia's group were experiencing a one-sided slaughter. The students even commented that the assassins were far weaker than expected. Elia searched anxiously for Eleanor, while Eleanor herself required only a single swing of her sword to cut down 4 assassins at once. She deliberately left one alive and demanded to know whether additional accomplices were hiding nearby. Although the captured assassin refused to speak, Eleanor had already deduced that Crescent Moon's Hafmid must have appeared in person. She pressed the surviving assassin for Hafmid's precise location. Elia could not understand why Eleanor was so persistent. Eleanor explained succinctly that Crescent Moon's Hafmid was a terrifying assassin who not only killed his targets but also stole their faces afterward. She then posed a pointed question: who among them would be the easiest target to eliminate? Elia immediately thought of Dowd, yet she could not understand why he would seemingly sacrifice himself. What confused her even more was that the assassin's true target should clearly have been President Eleanor. She once again questioned Eleanor about her relationship with Dowd, but Eleanor continued to deny any connection firmly. Unaware of this conversation, Halfmid was currently facing an unprecedented predicament. He was being overwhelmingly beaten by what he had assumed to be a frail rookie struck repeatedly with nothing more than a crude wooden staff. For the first time, Dodd revealed the essence of the Tristan family swordsmanship. Halfmid instantly recognized the distinctive style and finally understood that he had walked into a trap from the very beginning. He accused Dodd of deliberately disguising himself as weak in order to lure him in and demanded loudly to know his true identity. At that moment, a system prompt appeared, deadly charm activated. The villain feels awe toward your meticulous planning. As an experienced gamer, Dodd had long known that weapons could not be used within this restricted area, which was precisely why he had intentionally led Halfmid there. Accepting his defeat, Halfmid asked Dodd to deliver the final blow. However, Dodd indicated that he had no intention of killing him. Instead, he planned to let Halfmid leave alive so that news of the failed assassination would spread. If a top-tier expert like Halfmid had failed, no one else would dare attempt to assassinate her again. Although he did not know the identity of the client behind the plot, Dodd understood one crucial truth: if these assassination attempts continued, the demon sleeping within Elnor would eventually awaken. This possibility had to be completely eliminated. Halfmid questioned Dowd's decision, warning that if he were released he might attempt to assassinate Elnor again in the future. Dowd calmly responded that Halfmid could try again if he wished, firmly declaring that when that time came he would personally protect her. His tone remained steady and unwavering. Halfmid, unable to suppress his curiosity, asked whether Elnor was truly that important to him. Dowd acknowledged this without hesitation. At that moment, the system issued another prompt. Deadly charm activated. The villain's favorability greatly increased. Dowd suddenly sensed someone approaching and turned his head toward the source of the sound. It was Elnor, who had followed the disturbance and arrived at the scene. After the class assignment examination concluded, Beatrix furrowed her brows, speculating that there must be an insider involved, as the assassins could not have infiltrated the academy so easily otherwise. It was clear that their only objective had been to kill Elnor. The freshmen were highly praised by the academy for successfully repelling the assassins. However, one exception stood out. Dowd. He appeared to deliberately avoid drawing any attention from the academy. Inside the meeting room, Elnor remained distracted, completely ignoring Beatrix as she spoke. Beatrix, growing increasingly frustrated, finally lost her patience. She slammed an ink bottle down and demanded to know what was troubling Elnor, questioning why she had been so absent-minded all day. Elnor honestly admitted that there was someone who had been occupying her thoughts, explaining that Beatrix herself had mentioned him earlier. Needless to say, the person she referred to was Dowd. Beatrix frowned deeply, asserting that Elnor might have developed feelings for that country noble. She warned that although she did not know how he had managed to influence her, if such news were to spread, the Tristan family might resort to extreme measures. Elnor quickly denied being influenced or seduced. However, Beatrix reminded her to remain cautious, pointing out that the Elnor of the past would have immediately treated such a person with suspicion. She questioned why Elnor was behaving so differently now. Elnor fell into deep thought and stated that she would personally observe and test Dowd at close range in order to determine his true intentions. Meanwhile, Dowd received an official notification letter from the academy informing him that his class assignment results had been adjusted. He reflected that he did not particularly care which class he was placed in. However, according to academy rules, he should have been assigned to the special class alongside Elia. He questioned internally why he was being excluded despite meeting the qualifications. At that moment, a system prompt appeared. First main quest completed. Next task updated. Please resolve the freshman reception ceremony event. Reward: exclusive equipment materials. In the game, the freshman reception ceremony was a critical event that determined each student's future profession, whether archer, warrior, or another specialized path. Dowd decided that he would consider his professional path later. What demanded his immediate attention was the fact that two major quest activities were about to overlap. Based on his experience as a gamer, he knew that when such events coincided, it would inevitably trigger extraordinary and dangerous developments. Elnor's favorability had directly increased by several stages, signaling that the trigger for her related activities was drawing near. At the same time, Elia's favorability was also steadily rising, and her quest activities had already been initiated. With both the final boss and the game's protagonist having their quest activities activated simultaneously, it became clear that this was a sign of major events about to unfold. The system then rewarded Dowd with an Elnor skill card, an item capable of copying any one of Elnor's abilities. Dowd was filled with amazement at the realization that he now possessed the ability to copy the strongest boss's skill. However, he quickly concluded that using it immediately would be an enormous waste. Although Elnor was currently the Academy's top predator, she was like Elia, a growth-type boss who would acquire countless overwhelming skills in the future. Using the card now would only limit its true potential. For that reason, he focused on his most urgent objective, which was obtaining the essential item he needed. 3 days later, Dowd headed straight toward a dilapidated warehouse and purchased equipment from the point shop to conceal his identity. This warehouse was a place he knew well. In his previous life as a player, it had been a secret farming location where he frequently gathered rare equipment. After searching the area thoroughly, he managed to obtain several useful items, but the most crucial object he needed was still nowhere to be found. Eventually, in a forgotten corner of the warehouse, he discovered a mysterious incense burner that radiated ancient power. Dowd carefully retrieved the incense burner from the bottom layer, handling it with caution as he secured the object. Just as he was about to leave, the piles of accumulated junk throughout the warehouse began to sway dangerously. He immediately realized that things would never proceed smoothly for him. With a thunderous crash, the unstable piles collapsed all at once. In that instant, Dowd instinctively reached forward and caught a falling girl. The moment he saw her face, he immediately recognized her. She was Yura, the powerful boss of Chapter 2, known among players as the Sword God Maniac. At that moment, Dowd finally realized that Yura had been living inside this warehouse all along. Suddenly, the system warning flashed before him. Crisis detected. Threat level assessment, EX grade. Desperate survival activated at EX level. Dowd wanted to explain himself clearly, but he quickly realized that he had no opportunity to do so. Yura showed no intention of listening and immediately launched an overwhelming attack. Unlike his sparring match with Elia, this confrontation with Yura was a genuine life-or-death battle. Dowd was now standing at the very edge of survival. His body was forcibly elevated to EX level and immense pain surged through him as the skill pushed his limits. Even so, he attempted once again to convey that this was nothing more than a misunderstanding and that he meant no harm. Yura paused briefly, but in the next moment she launched another merciless assault. Dowd barely managed to evade her fatal strike. However, as he observed her movements more closely, he began to understand her combat style, and confidence slowly formed within him. As her next attack approached, Dowd stood completely still, unmoving like a mountain. He understood the secret behind her overwhelming power. Yura possessed an invincible ability that allowed her to unleash absolute destruction against enemies within 3 steps. However, she was incapable of harming anyone standing beyond that distance. This was an inescapable ancestral curse placed upon her. Yura roared in fury, demanding that he come closer so she could tear him apart. Meanwhile, Dowd's mind raced as he searched for a way out of the situation. He realized that this warehouse was not merely a battleground but Yura's sanctuary. It was her isolated dwelling, far removed from everyone else. The Academy's faculty rarely visited this place. From her condition, Dowd speculated that she must have been starving. Slowly, he reached into his belongings and handed her a cookie. It was a recovery cookie he had purchased from the point store. Yura immediately declared that such childish tricks could never deceive her. Yet in the very next second, she suddenly dashed forward and snatched the cookie from his hand. After finishing a hearty meal, Yura finally accepted that everything had been nothing more than a misunderstanding. Her hostility faded and she instead asked Dowd why he had come to this place. Naturally, Dowd could not admit that he had come to steal an item. Thinking quickly, he fabricated a story. He claimed that an acquaintance had asked him to deliver food to her and had instructed him to look after her properly. In the original game, there had never been an encounter with Yura in this warehouse. However, Dowd understood that forming a connection with her now would undoubtedly prove valuable in the future. He calmly told her that her sister was doing well in the Holy Empire, reassuring her that there was no need to worry. He also added that the Emperor had no intention of concerning himself with this place for the time being, and that keeping a low profile would be the wisest choice. Yura had originally come to the Alfonte Academy under the coercion of the Holy Emperor. The sword she carried was a world-renowned cursed blade, a ceiling-level artifact that placed her at the absolute peak of power. However, it was also the reason she suffered from the ancestral 3-step curse. She had endured endless despair just to survive. Informing her that her only remaining relative was safe could only bring her a small measure of peace. Not long after, outdoor class began. The instructor patiently explained professional career paths to the students. In just a few days during the freshman welcome ceremony, every student would be required to choose their future specialization. She carefully introduced each profession, explaining their strengths and roles. Dowd immediately recognized this as nothing more than the beginner tutorial from the game, designed to explain the world system to new players. However, this was no longer a game. If he treated it carelessly, the consequences would be real and potentially fatal. At that moment, one student raised a question, asking if the area ahead was the Void Zone. Dowd already knew the answer. The Void Zone was the remnant of the ancient war between gods and demons. It was here that divine messengers and heroes wielding inherited divine power had sealed away the demon race. Even after centuries had passed, the sacred energy of the gods and the deathly aura of demons still clashed violently within that place. If the demons were ever to escape, this area would instantly become the most dangerous location in the world. To prevent such a catastrophe, the Holy Empire, the Tribal Alliance, and the Imperial forces had formed a mutual agreement. Together, they established the Golden Triangle surveillance system. The Alfonte Academy, along with its military forces, existed for the sole purpose of maintaining that seal and preparing future warriors. Another student suggested moving closer to observe the Void Zone. The teacher explained that approaching the edge of the protective barrier was permitted, but going beyond it was strictly forbidden. Dowd knew what event would happen next. The lunch event was supposed to take place here. However, he had no intention of following the normal sequence. When the teacher announced that lunch would be held in the area, Dowd immediately requested permission to eat elsewhere. The teacher warned him not to wander too far. Nearby, a noble student sneered mockingly, calling him a show-off country bumpkin. Ignoring the ridicule, Dowd quietly took out the ancient incense burner he had obtained from the warehouse. He placed it down and lit the mysterious material within it. This incense burner was no ordinary object. its function was as miraculous as a modern telephone. To use it properly, as the incense burned, faint smoke rose into the air. Through it, Dowd established a connection with an unimaginable existence on the other side. Soon, his vision changed. On the other side, countless winged beings with halos above their heads were digging endlessly with shovels. These angels worked tirelessly, moving black bricks without rest. Some of them noticed Dowd watching, but their bald-headed leader refused to allow them even a moment to stop. A loud truck sped toward them and a harsh voice shouted, urging them to hurry and transport the bricks faster. The angels obeyed silently, continuing their labor without complaint. They weren't even given something as simple as a single cookie. Watching this absurd and surreal scene, Dowd stood frozen in place. He was completely dumbfounded. The bald-headed angel ignored Dowd's presence, continuing to command his army to work. These angels had been laboring all day without taking a single bite of food. Dowd then understood why angels rarely descended to the mortal realm. It turned out that the angelic realm had a strict hierarchical system governed by their own set of iron rules. According to the game storyline, one could only converse with angels in the chapter 2, but Dowd had already figured out their greatest desire. Dowd set out food and ate, deliberately devouring it ravenously in front of the angels, showing an exaggerated appetite. The angels, though watching, lacked the conditions to descend. Dowd suggested that angels should eat before continuing their labor and use the power of the incense burner to initiate a small offering ritual, sending the food into the angels' hands. The bald-headed angel ordered everyone to rest for 10 minutes. The material laws of the angelic world were vastly different from those of the human realm, and Dowd's portion of food was enough to satisfy many angels. After the meal, the bald-headed angel asked Dowd if he had any requests, preparing to bestow a blessing upon the incense burner for him, promising to fulfill his wish as long as he declared it. Dowd hadn't expected blessings to come without negotiation and wondered how communication with angels could be this simple. The bald-headed angel used the eye of insight to peer into Dowd's essence, realizing he possessed limitless potential and considered it an early investment in him. Dowd also guessed this was a trait favored by antagonists. The bald-headed angel told him that this power was far beyond imagination, and because of this trait he had attracted the attention of terrifying yet friendly predators. Most people would panic upon hearing this, but Dowd remained calm, which further convinced the angel of his judgment. By now, the angel's blessing was complete, and the angels were once again urged to transport the black bricks. Dowd was still pondering the meaning of terrifying yet friendly, when the bald-headed angel gave Dowd his final approval, and then the light screen image shut off. Dowd decided to seriously consider the angel's warning. The system notification displayed, the holy incense burner has gained 2 skills. Divine Ultima, level C+, consumes a small amount of mana to temporarily convert all additional stats into Constitution. This skill can evolve into Proof of Faith. Protective Shield level creates a protective barrier using a small amount of mana. This skill can evolve into Stigma. These 2 skills combined with Desperate Survival would cause his power to skyrocket, obtaining such a rare artifact at the beginning of the storyline. However, requiring mana to activate it was far too difficult for someone like Dowd, who did not possess a single relevant trait. Since he was currently incapable of learning magic, he ultimately chose an unpopular specialization known as Monster Exploration Studies. The instructor informed him that the academy required students to form pairs before entering simulation dungeons. In response, Dowd calmly stated that someone would be arriving shortly and reassured the instructor that there was no need for concern. Even the instructor found it difficult to believe that anyone would willingly select such an unpopular specialization. Not long afterward, the hero candidate Aaliyah arrived. Dowd had not originally intended to involve himself with Aaliyah, but after recalling the angel's words, he reconsidered his decision. He deliberately brought up Aaliyah's previous promise that they would greet one another when they met again. His sudden reminder left Aaliyah completely bewildered, especially since he had previously expressed his liking for Elnor, and Elnor herself appeared to show concern for him. This caused Aaliyah to misunderstand his intentions, leading her to assume that Dowd was deliberately provoking jealousy as a tactic to win Elnor's favor. The two of them soon arrived at the Academy's simulation dungeon. Dowd urged Aaliyah to place her trust in his abilities while reminding her about their first encounter. He bluntly stated that she had attempted to strike him during that meeting, and he firmly expressed that if she truly wished to build a cooperative relationship with him, she would need to follow his instructions without hesitation. Dowd immediately began directing Aaliyah's movements, informing her that 3 monsters were positioned at the 9 o'clock direction while 2 more were lurking on the ceiling. He further explained that the monsters' weak point was located at their necks. Following his guidance, Aaliyah charged forward decisively and began cutting down the monsters, while Dowd remained at the rear, calmly issuing precise instructions. When Aaliyah called out, urging him to assist her, Dowd firmly refused and instead warned her that 2 daggers would soon fly toward her in alternating succession, emphasizing that she possessed sufficient ability to deflect them. He continued by cautioning her that 3 seconds later she would need to evade a hidden arrow while also remaining alert against a sneak attack from behind. Just as he predicted, Aaliyah successfully dodged the concealed projectile while simultaneously blocking the sneak attack. This caused her to realize that Dowd's abilities were far beyond ordinary, leading her to believe that he should immediately join the fight to help finish the battle. However, Dowd was unable to provide direct assistance because the simulated monsters did not possess genuine malice, which meant his desperate survival ability could not be activated. This situation clearly demonstrated that desperate survival was not an all-powerful trait and reinforced the importance of strengthening one's fundamental combat abilities. At that moment, Aaliyah suddenly rushed toward Dowd, causing him to momentarily question whether he had pushed her too far. However, his concern quickly turned into shock when he realized that Aaliyah had instantly slain a monster that had been approaching him from behind, saving him in the process. The sudden strike startled him so greatly that it nearly frightened him out of his senses. Shortly afterward, the simulation dungeon announced that the two of them had achieved a new record for the fastest completion time. Aaliyah expressed her disbelief, questioning how such a record could have been broken when she had been the only one actively fighting. Dowd reflected internally, acknowledging with confidence that as a veteran player, such challenges were nothing more than trivial tasks that could be resolved within minutes. However, instead of revealing this truth, hearing his composed response only increased Aaliyah's frustration, leaving her both angered and dissatisfied. Meanwhile, their entire battle had been observed through a projection by Percy, the Dean of Spellcraft. After witnessing their extraordinary performance, Percy decided that it would be appropriate to increase the budget allocated for simulation battles. Another instructor agreed with this decision, stating that such measures were justified. However, the instructor also pointed out that something about Dowd was highly unusual. Percy initially dismissed Dowd as nothing more than a fraud, but the instructor strongly disagreed, explaining that even a hero candidate could not have achieved such results alone. Although the hero candidate appeared invincible in the eyes of ordinary people, the instructor emphasized that the truly exceptional individual was the one standing behind her. Every movement arrangement, every synchronized command, and every follow-up action and prediction had been executed with near-perfect precision. The instructor further explained that Dowd had calculated everything entirely within his mind, demonstrating battlefield awareness comparable to someone who had experienced countless real battles. Convinced of his assessment, the instructor ultimately proposed a bet with Percy, challenging his skepticism regarding Dowd's true capabilities. The two currently in the dungeon heard a voice, introducing himself as Conrad Valtador from the Night Department. He said he had heard about their battle and found it intriguing and had made a bet with Percy, the Dean of Spellcraft, to see if they could break the record set during his freshman year. If successful, they could make a request to Percy. Percy didn't understand the necessity of this, but Dowd confidently declared that they would definitely break the record. Percy thought the two were excessively arrogant, while Conrad declared the challenge had begun. On the other side, Elnor had noticed unusual changes in her body recently, unable to recall the movements her mother had taught her, and feeling exhausted after just one practice. The Tristan family bloodline carried traces of demons, and this dark rumor had two implications. One, they possessed extraordinary talents, and two, they were prone to berserk syndrome, which caused them to become violent and lose their sanity. Although the Tristan family members were all outstanding and made great contributions, they often met with tragic ends in their later years. For now, the situation was not severe, but her mind was blank. The teacher informed, "Didn't you want to know information about someone last time? I just found out that Dowd is currently with the next hero candidate." Elnor asked who the next hero candidate was, and the person replied, "It's the girl who sparred with Dowd, Elnia." Elnor asked why the two of them were alone together, and the teacher explained that it was because the simulation exam required pairs. Elnor sighed deeply and demanded to be taken to them immediately. Elnor sighed deeply and demanded to be taken to them immediately. Conrad gradually adjusted the dungeon difficulty, but Dowd insisted on setting it to the highest level. Percy angrily accused him of being too arrogant. She warned, "The highest difficulty is like real combat. Being overly competitive could cost you your life." However, Conrad believed Dowd must have something to rely on, so he set the dungeon to the highest difficulty as requested. Dowd reassured Elnia not to worry, stating that since the words had already been spoken, they could only give it their all. Percy sipped her tea and thought they might really die here. Elnia's face turned pale upon hearing this. Conrad, on the other hand, believed that Dowd wouldn't say such things if he wasn't confident, so there was no need to worry. If there really is danger, we can still intervene to save them. After saying this, Conrad activated the slaughter mode at the highest difficulty. Now was the time for Dowd to showcase his abilities. The system notified him of a sense of crisis, determining that his life was in danger. Under the enhancement of desperate survival, Dowd's strength surged dramatically. With a single strike, he took down a monster. Conrad immediately boasted to Percy, "See that? I knew it." Elnia also exclaimed in admiration as expected of Dowd. Percy was puzzled. Just moments ago, he had been cowering behind a girl like a coward. How had he suddenly become so heroic? Conrad thought Percy lacked insight and remarked, "The more monsters there are, the stronger that kid becomes." In other words, he grows stronger alongside the monsters. Dowd took down several monsters with a single strike, working seamlessly with Elnia. As she created opportunities, Dowd delivered the final blow to the last monster with a single strike. Without a doubt, the two of them set the highest record in history. At that moment, the last monster's corpse suddenly fell toward Dowd. A loud crash was heard as it was shattered. It turned out that Conrad had stepped in to help. Since Dowd and Elnia had achieved an unparalleled record, Conrad won the bet. Dowd and Elnia both received generous rewards and gained the right to make a request to Percy, the Dean of Spellcraft. Aaliyah couldn't believe they had earned such benefits, while Dowd sneaked a glance to see if Aaliyah rewards matched his own. At that moment, Aaliyah thought Dowd was calm and composed, able to foresee anything that might happen, as if everything was under his control. Dowd thought to himself, "Of course, it's because I already knew." Aaliyah extended her fist toward Dowd, saying, "Don't men often fist bump like this?" After the two bumped fists, the system notified that Aaliyah's curiosity had increased. She immediately ran off. At that moment, a voice suddenly commented, questioning whether she should be considered friendly or simply strange. Dowd was about to agree with the remark, but he immediately sensed that something was wrong. He quickly turned his attention toward the source of the voice and realized that the speaker was none other than the student president, Elnor. Elnor calmly asked Dowd whether he liked that freshman. Her sudden question caught him completely off guard. Dowd still could not find the right words to answer her. Just then, the system suddenly issued a crisis alert, forcing him to respond immediately. Panicking under pressure, Dowd stammered and expressed that although he had been training alongside Aaliyah, his heart had always been thinking of Elnor. Elnor froze momentarily after hearing his unexpected confession. Meanwhile, Dowd immediately regretted his words, internally criticizing himself for saying something so reckless and meaningless. However, to his surprise, Elnor softly repeated his statement, emphasizing the part about him thinking of her while being with someone else. She then directly questioned him about the reason behind those feelings. Her question left Dowd completely speechless, as he had no explanation to give. Seeing that he was unable to answer, Elnor eventually stopped pressing him and calmly stated that perhaps this was simply one of those friendships. She then remarked that she understood the reason, explaining that it was likely because she had saved him on the train before. She further reminded him to remember the priority listing, speaking as though it was something obvious. Dowd did not understand what she meant by that statement. Without further explanation, Elnor handed him a letter. Confused, Dowd had no idea what it contained. His mind immediately raced with possibilities, wondering whether it was a love letter or perhaps a duel application. Such an event had never occurred in the original game. Elnor explained that she had originally planned to give it to him the following day, but decided to give it to him now instead. She instructed him to open it only when he was alone. With no other choice, Dowd agreed. When he finally opened the letter, he was filled with deep regret. It turned out to be an invitation asking him to be her partner at the freshman welcome ceremony the next day. Being her partner itself was not particularly difficult, as it only required accompanying her during the event. However, the real problem was that refusing the invitation would result in severe penalties, including a decrease in favorability or even outright hostility. Just then, a knock suddenly sounded at his door. When he opened it, he found Aaliyah standing outside. She had also come to see him and handed him a letter. The moment he saw it, Dowd was overcome with a terrible premonition. Aaliyah explained that it was meant to be a surprise, mentioning that she had originally intended to give it to him during the simulation battle but had only just now gathered the courage to do so. She further explained that because of the student president's strange rules, she needed to leave immediately. Before departing, she told him to read it once he was inside, and then she quickly leaped away and disappeared. Dowd could not help but feel that the people in this world were far too strange. Even so, he still held onto a small hope. He convinced himself that since it came from Aaliyah, it might simply be a dual application. However, when he opened the letter, his hopes were instantly shattered. Just as he feared, it was also an invitation asking him to be her partner at the freshman welcome ceremony. Now that both the final boss, Elnor, and the protagonist, Aaliyah, had personally invited him to be their partner, Dowd immediately realized that this situation did not exist in the original storyline. He understood that he needed to find a solution quickly. Choosing Elnor would cause the protagonist to view him as a villain, while choosing Aaliyah would provoke the final boss and potentially place his life in danger. Refusing both invitations would likely result in an even worse outcome. After carefully considering his options, Dowd finally made a bold decision. He resolved to meet both of them at the same time. The following day, the freshman welcome ceremony began, and the venue was filled with students and nobles. Aaliyah arrived, dressed in elegant attire, drawing attention wherever she walked. Dowd also arrived, dressed appropriately for the occasion, though his expression carried an unusual seriousness. Before attending the banquet, he had spent all of his accumulated points to purchase a clone from the system store. This clone had the ability to create a perfect duplicate of himself. However, immediately after making the purchase, he triggered a special mission. The system issued a mission titled Double Date, explaining that he had chosen to deceive two extremely important individuals. It warned him that he must not be exposed before the event ended, and that failure would result in punishment. To ensure that his clone would not attract suspicion, Dowd deliberately instructed it to adopt a cold and gentlemanly demeanor. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed throughout the area, startling him. The source of the noise was a monster that had been captured outside and was originally intended for experimentation at the academy. However, it had escaped during transport. This incident marked the beginning of the game's main storyline. Recognizing the danger, Dowd decided that the safest course of action was to find a place to hide. With both Aaliyah and Elnor present, he was confident that handling the monster would not be an issue for them. However, while distracted, Dowd accidentally purchased a perfume called Pheromone from the system store. The moment he bought it, the perfume was automatically applied to him. Just then, Elnor approached him. She immediately noticed the unfamiliar scent and questioned whether he had applied something. Attempting to avoid suspicion, Dowd quickly insisted insisted that it was merely the natural scent of flowers and plants nearby. However, Elnor firmly denied his explanation, stating with certainty that it was perfume. More importantly, she admitted that the scent was affecting her in a way she could not control. The perfume's effects made it extremely difficult for Elnor to maintain her composure. At that moment, the system issued another notification, informing him that the pheromone was effective on the target, Elnor, but that she was actively resisting its influence and refusing to develop affection toward him. Despite her resistance, Elnor could not stop herself from commenting, expressing her sudden realization of how manly he appeared. Hearing this, Dowd was filled with fear. He realized that the perfume's effects were far stronger than he had anticipated. In order to divert her attention and reduce suspicion, he quickly suggested that they browse the nearby stalls together. This suggestion was not only meant to distract her but was also part of his larger strategy to avoid accidentally encountering his clone. Elnor continued struggling to suppress the growing affection she felt toward Dowd. Despite her efforts to maintain her composure, the pheromone's influence made it increasingly difficult for her to remain unaffected. Meanwhile, Dowd focused on following his plan precisely. His strategy was simple: his clone would accompany Aaliyah, while his real body remained beside Elnor, ensuring that neither of them discovered the deception. In order to reduce Elnor's affection toward him, Dowd deliberately suggested that they try grilled pig intestines. He believed that someone like Elnor, who was extremely conscious of her image and figure, would naturally dislike such crude and greasy food. However, to his complete surprise, the suggestion had the opposite effect. Elnor tasted the dish and immediately expressed her enjoyment, showing clear satisfaction with the flavor. Seeing this unexpected reaction, Dowd realized with frustration that distancing himself from this woman was proving far more difficult than he had anticipated. Afterward, the two of them walked toward a nearby general store. Elnor expressed her intention to give Dowd a gift. Hearing this, Dowd immediately decided to counter her action in an attempt to lower her affection for him. Instead, he expressed his intention to give her a gift first. He casually picked up an ordinary and inconspicuous button, believing it to be meaningless and unimpressive. Unexpectedly, Elnor noticed that one of the buttons on her uniform was missing. The button he had chosen perfectly matched her uniform. The coincidence was so unbelievable that even Dowd was left speechless by his own misfortune. While they were eating, Elnor asked Dowd whether he had decided on his academic major. In response, Dowd expressed his intention to join the theology department. Upon hearing this, Elnor immediately urged him to reconsider, explaining that with his abilities, failing to join the night division would be an enormous waste of his talent. Dowd then expressed that there were many things he wished to learn in the theology department. Hearing this, Elnor questioned him further, wanting to know exactly what he hoped to learn there. Dowd could not openly reveal the truth. He knew that the holy abilities taught in the theology department were essential for his survival. They were necessary not only to protect his own life but also to prevent Elnor from eventually descending into darkness. Unable to explain this directly, Dowd hesitated before expressing that ever since long ago, there had been someone he wanted to protect. Based on Dowd's knowledge from his previous life as a player, he knew that the secret society incident was approaching. The boss that would soon appear possessed an extreme weakness to holy power, making the theology department's abilities absolutely crucial. Hearing his statement, Elnor asked whether his decision had anything to do with her. She speculated that Dowd might already know about the Tristan family's curse, a terrifying affliction that slowly drove every member of her bloodline into madness. Of course, Dowd knew about it. He also knew that the only way to break the curse was through the angel's blessing, a miracle that required the simultaneous descent of several archangels. Elnor herself was aware of this method, but the difficulty of achieving such a miracle was so overwhelming that even members of her own family did not dare to attempt it. Elnor then directly questioned him, demanding to know his true intentions and asking why he was helping her and what his goal was. Without any hesitation, Dowd expressed that the person he wanted to protect was her. Elnor responded by expressing that she did not need anyone's protection. However, Dowd bluntly expressed that if he failed to protect her, he himself would also die. Hearing this, Elnor regarded him as an extremely strange and incomprehensible man. However, from Dowd's perspective, he was merely stating the absolute truth without exaggeration. Meanwhile, in another location, Aaliyah and Dowd's clone unknowingly wandered into the academy's basement. Aaliyah wanted to grow closer to Dowd and hoped to use this opportunity to ask him about the secrets of the Tristan family. However, she lacked experience in dealing with men and did not know how to approach the situation. As they explored the basement, they discovered numerous monsters being held in captivity. These creatures were experimental subjects used by the academy. More concerning was the presence of several medium-sized monsters which posed a significantly greater threat. For unknown reasons, these monsters were not properly restrained. Even more alarming was the presence of small explosive devices placed beside their cages. Suddenly, a deafening explosion echoed throughout the basement. One of the cages detonated violently. Without hesitation, Dowd's clone immediately threw himself over Aaliyah, shielding her body from the blast and protecting her from harm. At the same time, Dowd's real body located upstairs also heard the explosion. The sound spread across the entire venue, alerting everyone present. Aaliyah, confused and shaken, questioned Dowd's clone, asking why he had protected her. In response, the clone simply expressed that protecting her was his duty. Before she could question him further, the clone lost consciousness due to the damage sustained in the explosion. At that very moment, the medium-sized monster that had been contained inside the cage broke free completely. Seeing the imminent danger, Aaliyah quickly grabbed a steel pipe from the ground. This time, she expressed her determination to protect Dowd. On Dowd's side, the system suddenly displayed the main quest notification. It informed him that a monster had appeared and instructed him to subdue it. Realizing the severity of the situation, Dowd immediately expressed to Elnor that she needed to find a priest capable of using holy abilities. He further expressed that he had urgent matters to attend to and quickly departed. Elnor attempted to stop him, but Dowd firmly expressed that protecting the students must be their top priority. After arriving at the basement, Dowd first recovered his unconscious clone. He then questioned Aaliyah about the situation. Seeing that Dowd had regained consciousness, Aaliyah visibly relaxed and expressed relief. At that moment, the system issued a notification informing him that Aaliyah's favorability had increased, causing a change in the main storyline. From Elia, Dowd learned that a medium-sized monster had escaped containment. Aaliyah expressed that it was still possible to stop the creature. However, she also expressed that she was exhausted and needed time to recover. Dowd understood her condition, but he could not afford to delay. The main quest took absolute priority, and failure would result in severe penalties. Meanwhile, at the venue above, the escaped monster was relentlessly attacking the protective barrier surrounding the area. Without reinforcement through Angel's blessing, the barrier would inevitably collapse. Unfortunately, the priest whom Elnora had found expressed that he was incapable of using Angel's blessing. Hearing this, Elnora angrily expressed her disbelief, questioning how someone incapable of performing such a fundamental miracle could even be considered a priest. The priest responded by expressing that Angel's blessing was an extremely advanced barrier far beyond the capability of ordinary priests to cast. He explained that such a miracle required exceptional mastery and long preparation, and therefore they had no choice but to wait for the knights to arrive and resolve the situation. At that moment, Dowd rushed in from the basement. Without hesitation, he reached forward and snatched the rosary from the priest's neck, expressing his intention to handle the situation himself. The priest immediately rebuked him, expressing disbelief and questioning what a mere student like him could possibly know about casting blessings. Ignoring the priest's protest, Dowd placed the rosary into the holy incense burner. He then activated the skills Asceticism and Holy Shield simultaneously. The system immediately issued a warning, alerting Dowd that his life was in imminent danger. His desperate survival ability automatically activated at the EX level, forcefully elevating his body beyond its natural limits. Dowd moved swiftly, sliding past the monster while expressing to the professors nearby that they needed to evacuate the students immediately while he held the creature back. He positioned himself directly in front of the monster, standing as the final line of defense. Asceticism activated fully, converting all of Dowd's physical abilities into pure endurance. At the same time, Holy Shield activated and a radiant pair of wings manifested around him, forming a powerful protective barrier that enveloped his entire body. Everyone present stared in shock, unable to believe what they were witnessing. They realized that this was unmistakably Angel's blessing. Even the violent attacks of the medium-sized monster were completely unable to break through the barrier. Elnor's eyes widened as she observed the scene. The priest, on the other hand, was unable to accept the reality before him. He could not comprehend how a mere student was capable of casting a holy blessing that normally required trained priests to perform lengthy rituals. Elnor, however, did not share his disbelief. Having witnessed Dowd's hidden strength before, she understood that he was far from ordinary. Meanwhile, the priest began angrily cursing the monster, expressing his frustration that it could not even break through the barrier created by a student. Hearing his arrogant and useless remarks, Elnor felt a surge of killing intent toward him. At that moment, Eldia, who had already recovered her strength, approached and struck the priest unconscious with a single precise blow. She expressed that someone so useless did not deserve to interfere and implied that sparing his life was already an act of mercy. Elnor then asked where Elia had been earlier. Elia explained that she had lost consciousness in the basement and had only just regained awareness and returned. She then expressed her astonishment, stating that Dowd appeared capable of storing blessings in advance and activating them instantly when needed. She further expressed her disbelief, noting that Dowd was not even a combat-type priest, and yet he was performing feats that would normally require at least 10 years of dedicated training. Hearing this, Elnor recalled Dowd's earlier words when he had expressed his desire to study theology for the sole purpose of protecting her. Realizing this, Elia began to feel a faint sense of jealousy toward Elnor. Elia then expressed that Dowd was risking his life for Elnor, stating that otherwise he would have had no reason to go to such extreme lengths. Elia's words caused Elnor to fall into deep contemplation. As someone fated to become an antagonist, her life had always been surrounded by darkness, isolation, and despair. Yet now, within that endless darkness, she perceived what felt like a single ray of light, and that light originated from the strange and incomprehensible man standing before her. At that moment, Dowd had reached his absolute limit. His body trembled as his strength began to fail, and he was on the verge of collapse. Finally, Elnor took action. She stepped forward and unleashed a single decisive slash, demonstrating the true power of the Tristan family's swordsmanship. Her blade moved with overwhelming precision as she thrust forward repeatedly, followed by the release of a massive crescent-shaped sword aura. A deafening explosion echoed through the area. The monster was instantly overwhelmed and defeated. The power of her attack was completely different from the imitation swordsmanship Dowd had used before. It was pure, absolute, and overwhelming. However, what puzzled Dowd even more was the fact that in the original game, Elnor had never intervened during this monster incident. The system displayed the quest result monster suppression completed with 0 fatalities and outstanding achievement. It also indicated that the knights would arrive in approximately 30 seconds. Dowd quickly realized another important detail. The professor who had advocated for live monster research belonged to the Tristan faction. By intervening personally, Elnor had effectively admitted fault on behalf of her own family. Given her personality, she should never have done such a thing, and yet she had chosen to act. Before he could fully process the reason, something unexpected happened. The monster engulfed in flames had not completely died. Suddenly, it launched a final desperate attack toward Elnor. Seeing the imminent danger, Dowd moved without hesitation. He rushed forward once more and activated angelic protection, placing himself between Elnor and the monster's attack. The impact struck him directly. Blood spilled from his mouth as the overwhelming force shattered his remaining strength. His vision faded and his consciousness slipped away into darkness. When Dowd finally regained consciousness, he found himself lying on a bed. Dowd blinked at the flood of new information, trying to process everything at once. Sitting in front of him was none other than Adelante, the Chancellor of Alfonte Academy, a figure whose presence alone carried the weight of authority. She began matter-of-factly informing him that the escaped monster had been defeated. Dowd immediately wondered why such an important figure would personally meet with him. Adelante continued, saying there was bad news and even worse news. The bad news: Dowd had become the most talked-about student at the academy. No one had ever seen someone so unlucky, constantly dragged into every incident. Dowd thought bitterly, "It's not like I'm doing it on purpose." The worst news concerned demons. Adelante asked how much he actually knew. Surprisingly, Dowd's expression remained neutral, showing no hint of nervousness. The Chancellor was taken aback. Most people would be intimidated by her presence. Dowd calmly replied that he had no intention of sharing what he knew, suspecting the Chancellor might have ulterior motives. After all, he was the only student who hadn't been assigned a class or attended lectures, marking him as unusual. Adelante nodded knowingly and explained everything in detail. Ever since Dowd had entered the academy, he had been swept into a series of incidents that kept the faculty busy controlling witnesses. She elaborated that tensions between nations were rising, and whenever talent was discovered, the powers would go to any lengths to recruit it, even if it meant chaos. Dowd silently connected the dots. He realized that the ongoing coup within the Tribal Alliance and the reorganization of the Holy Empire were both part of an imperial succession struggle. The Chancellor explained further the three powers had formed a delicate golden triangle. On the surface, they appeared friendly, but in reality, they were in constant competition for the best talent. The Empire of Alfonte, the Tribal Alliance, and the Holy Empire were quietly vying for influence, and every corner of the continent reflected this tension. Dowd noticed another pattern. His involvement in so many incidents without anyone intervening suggested that someone was intentionally keeping him in the dark. Adelante seemed to admire his sharp perception. Dowd cautiously asked what would happen if he were to attract too much attention. Adelante's answer was chilling. That would naturally lead to the world's destruction. The weight of her words left him speechless. She then presented a piece of paper and asked if he recognized the symbol on it. Dowd instantly recognized it as the seal of demon purification. Adelante explained that the so-called purification organization was actually a cult devoted to resurrecting demons. The repeated assassination attempts on Elnor and the monster escape incidents were all orchestrated by them. Dowd's mind raced. Why was she telling him all this? Adelante handed him another item, a card, which Dowd immediately identified as an interdimensional key capable of opening a portal to his world. Such an item could drastically disrupt the balance of the game. Adelante, reading his expression, deduced that he understood its significance. She encouraged him to use it wisely, hinting that more gifts could follow if he pleased the powers behind it, and instructed him to keep the day's events a secret. Before leaving, she asked how he was getting along with Elia and Elnor. Dowd awkwardly replied that things were fine. Adelante smiled and said, "Good, please keep it that way." When Dowd hesitated, she added, "If not, the world could end." Dowd could only stare in disbelief. Was the world really this fragile? Adelante, however, remained serious. Her words weren't an exaggeration. She herself intended to incorporate these three students into her ultimate plan. The fact that Dowd had obtained a non-player item indicated that the main quest had indeed encountered a deviation. At that moment, Dean Conrad arrived. Dowd quickly hid the interdimensional key and asked what was happening. Conrad explained that since Dowd hadn't been assigned to a class, a temporary class had been arranged for him. Tomorrow, he would attend lessons with Elnor as class president and Elia as vice president. Dowd felt a sense of impending doom settle over him. The next day, during class, chaos ensued. Elnor frequently criticized the professor, claiming his theories were too long-winded and useless for practical combat. The professor, intimidated by the Tristan family's influence, didn't dare argue. Meanwhile, Ilya insisted the explanations were correct, creating constant friction. Poor Dowd was caught in the middle, silently trembling at the argument. Elia struck a triumphant pose. Dodd is clearly on my side. Elnor shot back, this is only a single loss. A blonde student in the room watched Dodd closely. Other students, noticing the recurring tension, began casting increasingly curious and unusual glances toward him. Dodd decided to set aside the classroom drama and check his system updates. The results were promising. Elnor's favorability had risen from trust level 5 to affection level 1. Tristan's swordsmanship proficiency had reached 58%. He had acquired a basic skill, breathing technique, Deep, which improved endurance and stamina and synergized exceptionally well with Tristan's swordsmanship. Dodd leaned back, realizing that despite the chaos, progress was being made, and the real challenges were only beginning. These two techniques could almost be activated simultaneously, and based on their characteristics they formed a top-tier combination. The person who had mastered this combination to perfection was Elnor. The reason she became the final boss was her monstrous close-quarters combat abilities. At the same time, Elia's favorability level had also increased by 1 stage. As a result, Dodd acquired a new skill called Rule of Evil. This ability allowed him to exert his influence over good people affiliated with him. However, those individuals were required to accept one request from him. The higher the favorability of a good person, the greater the rewards he would receive. Furthermore, turning good people into bad ones would yield even greater rewards. This new skill left Dodd confused. He questioned what it truly meant for turning good people into bad ones to yield even greater rewards. Not long afterward, the students participated in an outdoor class. Professor Conrad instructed everyone to collect something they liked within 10 minutes. He explained that the judging criteria would depend entirely on his mood, and that the student president would also participate in evaluating the results. Upon hearing this, Elia formed a mischievous smirk. Meanwhile, Dodd remained deep in thought, pondering the true meaning of his new skill and how he could turn good people into bad ones. At that moment, Elia approached and invited Dodd to join her. In response, Dodd suggested that she should go with her own friends instead. Elia responded by saying that Dodd was also her friend. Dodd, however, knew that Elia was meant to work alongside the hero's party, and he believed that if he joined them he would only appear out of place. Elia hesitated before asking if Dodd was feeling unwell. Dodd responded by saying that it wasn't the case, then added while distancing himself that they were not that close to begin with, questioning whether they truly had such a relationship. Hearing those words, Elia's expression immediately changed. She responded by telling him that his words were truly hurtful, then turned around and left. Trisha, a member of the hero's party, quickly noticed that Elia was deeply upset. Meanwhile, Dodd began to feel that his words may have been too harsh. At that moment, someone approached Dodd. It was Talion, the mid-boss of Chapter 1 and the most skilled student in his class after Elia. Talion immediately questioned Dodd about his relationship with Elia, and Dodd responded by explaining that they were merely acquaintances. Talion refused to believe him. He responded by saying that someone as talented as Elia could not possibly associate with someone like Dodd, and added that there must have been something suspicious about their duel. At that moment, a system notification appeared. A good character had become angry due to Dodd's influence. Dodd immediately realized that the angrier a person became, the closer they were to fulfilling the conditions required to turn from good to bad. Talion then demanded that Dodd admit the duel had been a fraud. In order to provoke him further, Dodd responded by stating that the duel had not been a fraud, and added that Talion was the only one who believed that because he had witnessed his target being knocked down by a single punch. He further declared that Talion had realized at that moment that Dodd was an insurmountable wall standing before him. Talion immediately fell for the bait and challenged Dodd to a bet on who would score higher in the class. Dodd had not expected him to take the challenge so quickly. Elsewhere, Professor Conrad confronted Elnor, questioning why she had already given Dodd a perfect score even though the exam was not finished. Elnor showed little interest in explaining and simply insisted that Dodd deserved the score. She added that if Conrad doubted her judgment, she would personally observe Dodd and explain exactly why he had earned it. Conrad, however, was not fooled. He understood that this was merely an excuse for Elnor to spend time with Dodd, likely because she did not want him to be alone with the hero candidate. Because of this, Conrad firmly ordered her to remain where she was. Meanwhile, Trisha noticed that something felt off about Elia. Even though Elia tried to hide it, Trisha could clearly sense the negative emotions surrounding her. When Trisha asked what was bothering her, Elia initially refused to speak, but Trisha already suspected she had something on her mind. Eventually, Elia admitted the truth. Dodd had tried to draw a line between them, while she only wanted them to remain friends. She felt hurt, believing they had known each other for a long time and that his rejection had been unnecessarily harsh. Trisha tried to comfort her, suggesting that Dodd might not have meant it that way. She reasoned that Dodd was only a small baron without a powerful background, and standing too close to a hero candidate like Elia could easily attract resentment. According to Trisha, he was probably keeping his distance to avoid causing trouble for her, even if he still cared deep down. After hearing this explanation, Elia felt that it made some sense. At the same time, while Dodd continued the exam, a system notification appeared before him. It informed him that Talion's anger had surpassed the critical threshold, activating the Rule of Evil. As a result, Dodd received both a reward and a new command. Moments later, Talion stormed toward him in fury, accusing Dodd of stealing the prey he had been about to claim during their supposed fair competition.
Dodd calmly asked him to wait for a moment. Talion assumed he was about to say something important, but instead Dodd casually suggested that they simply split the rewards in half. This suggestion only enraged Talion further. In anger, he immediately activated his skill Spear Throw and launched an attack at Dodd. However, the spear never reached its target. It was suddenly stopped mid-attack. Neither Dodd nor Talion immediately understood what had happened.
A moment later, they realized that Elia had stepped in front of Dodd and blocked the strike, declaring firmly that Talion should keep his hands off her friend. Talion greeted Elia, remarking that it had been a long time since they last met and recalling that their previous encounter happened during the monster subjugation battle. Elia immediately responded by placing her sword against his neck. In a cold tone, she reminded him that this was their first meeting since she had defeated him. Meanwhile, Dodd could not understand why Elia had suddenly appeared. From Elia's perspective, however, it looked like Talion was bullying him. Without even listening to his explanation, she kicked Talion to the ground. Talion could not comprehend why someone as skilled as Elia would side with Dodd. In response, Elia dismissed his complaints and stated that she had no interest in hearing such nonsense. When Talion argued that Dodd had deceived him first, she firmly rejected the accusation, saying that she did not believe Dodd would ever lie. She added that even if he had done so, it would only have been to teach Talion a lesson. She even warned him that if he continued, he might end up unconscious from a punch just as she once had. These words left Talion stunned. Realizing the rumors about Elia might be true, he immediately knelt down and apologized to Dodd, promising that he would never approach him again without permission. With the situation resolved, Elia quietly sheathed her sword and prepared to leave without even speaking to Dodd. Watching her walk away, Dodd wondered whether she truly considered him a friend. Still, he felt that maintaining their current distance was the best choice. As Dodd prepared to head to Professor Conrad to have his exam graded, Trisha approached. Knowing how talkative she could be, Dodd left before she could finish what she was about to say. Trisha understood exactly what had happened. Under normal circumstances, Elia would only say a few words to resolve a conflict and would rarely draw her sword so quickly, especially for someone else's sake. When Dodd arrived near Professor Conrad, he immediately sensed that something unusual had occurred. Conrad was still grumbling in frustration, blaming the situation on the student council president. Nearby, Elnor lay unconscious on the ground. Conrad explained irritably that Elnor had insisted on entering the forest and had acted without permission, which led to her current state. He even suspected that she might simply be pretending to be unconscious. Ignoring the commotion, Dodd asked Conrad to grade his exam first. He then presented the high-quality materials he had collected earlier. Based on both their quality and quantity, it was obvious that he had achieved first place. Conrad remarked that if the materials were given to Percy, she would certainly be pleased, especially considering that Dodd still possessed a wish agreement. He suggested that Dodd could use this opportunity to earn some favor with her. Just as Dodd was about to leave, Trisha appeared again. Conrad asked her to treat Elnor, while Trisha took the opportunity to advise Dodd to be a little kinder to Elia, noting that she seemed somewhat unusual lately. Dodd already understood that the situation could easily become more complicated. He thanked Trisha for the warning and calmly assured her that she did not need to worry because he would handle it himself. While treating Elnor, Trisha reflected on the situation. She quietly thought that Dodd might never truly escape Elia's grasp. Elia herself might not even realize it yet, but there was a strong possibility that she would eventually cross that line. Meanwhile, Dodd arrived at the spellcraft department and requested to use his wish agreement to create something. Such a request forced the department staff to work overtime. Dodd knew that the Purifier boss battle was approaching, and he needed to prepare himself as thoroughly as possible. The Chancellor had already issued instructions that Dodd's request should be fulfilled whenever possible, as long as they did not involve anything excessively unusual. Previously, Dodd had obtained an evil seed from Elias's skill rewards, an item that allowed him to use the rule of evil once on either Elia or Talion. However, Dodd knew that this alone would not be enough to face the upcoming boss. Defeating the Purifier would require multiple offensive strategies. Because of this, Dodd made an astonishing request. He asked the department to construct a supercannon powerful enough to destroy the entire academy. Hearing this request left Percy completely stunned. In disbelief, she angrily called Dodd a scoundrel and demanded to know the real reason he wanted to build such a destructive weapon. Dodd took out the reward contract and calmly retorted that the contract clearly stated they were required to fulfill any ordinary request, questioning whether building a cannon should not be considered an easy task. Percy immediately emphasized that constructing a cannon was far from simple, her tone firm as she explained it was no trivial matter. Dodd then made a solemn promise that he would never use it to harm anyone, but added that there was one specific target that needed to be destroyed. Taking into account Dodd's outstanding performance during the monster incident, Percy finally agreed to his request. Though as she did, she quietly muttered that the Chancellor was a strange person for saying things like falling in love could save the world. The moment those words left her mouth, Percy instantly regretted it, realizing that talking to herself like that was strange, though perhaps understandable after being single for 50 years. Dowd told her to calm down, before asking when the items she had promised to retrieve from the Vision warehouse for him and Ilya would be delivered. And in the end, Percy agreed to build the cannon but stated that Dowd would need to gather the materials himself. Fortunately, with the interdimensional key given to him by the Chancellor, collecting those materials would not be a problem. At that moment, Dowd encountered a man carrying a cane, who greeted him politely, the man introducing himself as Galdier, the operator of the charity organization known as the Purifying House. However, Dowd knew very well that it was not a true charity at all, but merely a front for laundering money, and that Galdier was in fact the leader of the Purifiers. Galdier claimed he had heard about how Dowd single-handedly stopped the escaped monster and handed him a business card, praising him as an exceptionally outstanding student and expressing his desire to invite him to dinner to discuss important matters. Dowd replied that they could simply talk here, noting internally that in the original story Galdier was supposed to approach Elia, yet now he had come to him instead, making him question whether the system had shifted the role of protagonist onto himself. The more he thought about it, the more something felt off, and though reluctant, he eventually said he would consider the invitation, only for Galdier to immediately set a meeting 3 days later at the Eyes of Twilight. Dowd recognized the place as an upscale restaurant located outside the school, and the golden business card he received was far too eye-catching to ignore, making him realize that just like before he could not avoid the main quest, there were things he could control and things he could not, things he understood and things that remained unknown, all of it filled with uncertainty and danger, yet by combining these elements defeating the evolutionist might not be impossible. Although the exact reason remained unclear, it increasingly seemed that the role of protagonist had shifted from Elia to Dowd himself. With the intention of stepping back once he survived this crisis, Dowd approached Elnor's door and knocked, and just as she was about to open it, he told her there was no need to come out, explaining that he only wanted to briefly share his intention. Clearing his throat, he asked if she would be free 3 days later. But before she could respond, someone suddenly interrupted her and complained about her overdue books, pointing out that she kept borrowing many without reading them. Elnor quickly silenced the person in embarrassment as Dowd continued and invited her to go with him to the Eyes of Twilight. The nearby girls immediately recognized it as a well-known dating spot, causing the atmosphere to shift as Elnor asked why he wanted to go with her. Dowd calmly replied that there was something he wanted to tell her there, and upon hearing this, Elnor's face flushed red as she shyly asked if he would be the one paying. When Elia was a child, she was the kind of little girl who would cry whenever her brother pushed her over. Every time he returned from work, he would bring her cookies, gently comforting her as he spoke about his future, telling her that thanks to the Baron he might finally become a trainee knight. Not long after he left for the battlefield, and as she drifted into sleep, it felt as if it were only a dream. In that dream, her brother smiled warmly and promised that once he became a knight, he would protect her no matter what. At that moment, she suddenly woke up as someone knocked on her door, pulling her out of the lingering warmth of that memory. Outside, Dowd stood waiting as he apologized to Elia, explaining that as someone from the countryside, he had not yet adjusted to the atmosphere of the academy, admitting that he was wrong for saying they were not friends before, as he offered her cookies he had brought from the kitchen, saying they were actually quite good. Elia quickly snatched the cookies and replied that there was no need to apologize between friends. Hearing the word friend caused Dowd's eyes to light up as he immediately invited Elia to go somewhere with him, insisting that it was urgent. Elia could not help but feel suspicious, wondering if Dowd had completely lost his mind. Meanwhile, Eleanor seemed distracted as a girl beside her reported that someone from the tribal alliance would be transferring to their school, explaining that although she was the daughter of a tribal leader, she was essentially in exile, her name being Lilu Garuda, a name even Eleanor recognized. At the same time, news spread that the true saint of the Holy Empire would also be arriving next semester, suggesting that the Chancellor had likely arranged everything behind the scenes. With both the saint and the daughter of a tribal leader appearing at the academy simultaneously, it was clear that something unusual was being planned. Eleanor quietly reflected on this strange gathering of individuals, including Dowd, and felt that something about the situation did not seem right. At that moment, Dowd and Elia were lying side by side as Elia asked in confusion if they really had to do this. Only then was it revealed that they were lying on top of a catapult, a tool borrowed from the Vision warehouse. Without hesitation, Dowd pressed the launch button, catching Elia completely off guard as she had never expected to be dragged out in the middle of the night for something like this. In an instant, they were launched high into the sky, soaring through the darkness as Elia screamed loudly while Dowd reminded her to stay conscious and not faint. As they flew through the air, they located the position of the interdimensional portal and prepared to enter. Before jumping in, Dowd tried to comfort her, telling her not to worry, and for a brief moment his words reminded Elia of her brother. With no time left to hesitate, the two of them leaped forward together and disappeared into the interdimensional portal. Knowing time was limited, Dowd tells Elia not to touch anything, warning that it could be dangerous. Explaining the situation, he says the gravity here is unstable and instructs her to jump off the stone. Hesitating at first, Elia lacks the courage to move, her body frozen by fear. After a brief moment, she gathers herself and follows Dowd's instructions, finally stepping forward and jumping down. As she falls, memories begin to resurface, dragging her back to the day her family was annihilated. Her brother had urged her to leave quickly, promising that he would go back to save their parents. Clinging tightly to his cape, Elia refused to let go, knowing deep down that their parents were already gone. She could not bear to lose her only brother as well. Understanding the situation, her brother realized that if they tried to escape together, neither of them would survive. With no other choice, he told her the final lie of his life. Telling her not to think about anything, he urged her to run as fast as she could. He promised to meet her at the hill where he always trained once she reached safety. Reassuring her with a smile, he said everything would be fine and that he would catch up soon. Snapping back to reality, Dowd grabs Elia's hand, steadying her as he calms her down. Speaking gently, he assures her that things will get easier once she gets used to it. Moments later, Dowd locates their target, the ghost of Gregory's Hall. Handing Elia a bag, he tells her they will need it for their escape. Confused, Elia begins to question what is happening, when suddenly the colorful sky darkens. A massive bloody mouth opens above them as if ready to swallow them whole. Recognizing the threat, Dowd identifies it as a beast from the interdimensional space. Warning her quickly, he tells Elia to prepare to leave at any moment. The creature begins spitting out numerous floating bubbles. Acting without hesitation, Dowd instructs her to collect them using the bag. Panicking, Elia rushes to gather as many bubbles as she can, her hands trembling just as the beast lunges forward to devour them. Both they are pulled back into the real world in the nick of time. Everything unfolds exactly as planned, and the time limit on the Chancellor's card proves to be precise. Catching his breath, Dowd asks Elia if she is hurt, concern clear in his voice. Sweating heavily, she brushes off his hand, still shaken by the experience. Staring at him, she questions whether he had planned everything from the very beginning. Without hesitation, Dowd confidently replies that everything was completely under control. He explains that this is a ghost farming method commonly used by veteran players. Still unsatisfied, Elia presses further, asking why he never mentioned the interdimensional realm before. Calmly, Dowd admits that if he had told her, she probably would not have come. Frustrated, Elia throws the bag filled with bubbles at him, complaining loudly. She says going to a place like that in the middle of the night felt like experiencing hell itself. Suddenly, a system notification appears, stating that Elia's affection has increased significantly. Completely confused, Dowd stands there in disbelief, unable to understand why her affection level went up. Shortly afterward, Dowd finds Chancellor Atalanta calmly practicing yoga and hands her the spirit captured from the interdimensional space. At the same time, he informs her that the interdimensional card was put to good use. The Chancellor shows clear surprise at Dowd's efficiency, her eyes quickly drawn to his unusual hairstyle. Dowd casually explains that it was caused by the thunder magic of the timid Minister Percy during the transfer of the psychic entity. Without wasting time, Dowd makes a request, asking if she can imbue these psychic entities, the residual consciousness of great figures, into a single item. Understanding immediately, the Chancellor realizes that this method would gradually strengthen those lingering consciousnesses. It becomes obvious to her that Dowd is carefully preparing for something in the future. Unable to hide her curiosity, she asks what is driving him to go this far. From defeating an assassin and overpowering a hero candidate to stopping dangerous monsters, she questions what truly motivates him. Instead of answering, Dowd turns the question back on her, asking why she is giving him such unusual attention. He points out that she has never questioned how he knew about the interdimensional space or the concept of psychic entities. He continues by mentioning how he defeated IA and stopped the monster, feats no ordinary student could accomplish. Looking directly at her, he says the entire academy seems to revolve around him, and that her presence appears everywhere in his daily life. With such careful preparation, he asks what exactly she expects him to become. In response, the Chancellor lets out a light laugh, brushing aside the tension with ease. She casually claims that the reason for her special attention is simply because he is too cute. Despite the playful answer, both of them clearly understand that each is hiding something. Neither side chooses to expose the truth, silently agreeing to keep their secrets for now. Before moving forward, however, the Purifier's mission still needs to be completed. A system notification suddenly appears announcing the Eyes of Twilight event and stating that someone is waiting. Arriving at the location, Dowd asks Elnor how long she has been waiting. Calmly, she replies that it has not been long, only about 6 hours. Seeing her carefully prepared appearance, Dowd cannot help but blush slightly. If she had been waiting that long, it means she must have left even before sunset. Elnor casually mentions that it has been a long time since she attended the Full Moon Festival, so she took extra time to prepare. Even now, Dowd struggles to meet her gaze directly. The atmosphere makes it clear that this is no ordinary meeting, but something closer to a proper date. At that moment, Elnor gently takes his hand and leads him toward the crowd. The Eyes of Twilight Festival is packed with people, making it difficult to move. Dowd briefly doubts whether they will even be able to enter. To his surprise, he spots Talion dressed as a waiter, loudly calling out numbers. Curious, Dowd asks about the situation and learns that Talion is working there because his family does not provide him with allowance money. Noticing Elnor's presence, Talion grows curious about their relationship. Dowd immediately blushes and awkwardly explains that there is nothing special between them. He cannot even explain how he ended up accompanying the student president. To anyone watching, however, they clearly look like they are on a date. Taking advantage of her position, Elnor attempts to use her authority as student president to gain entry. Unable to refuse, Talion naturally lets them pass without hesitation. Noticing something, Dowd asks Talion if he is wearing a necklace. Talion confirms that it was distributed by the Purifier Foundation. Without delay, Dowd activates the Rule of Evil skill, commanding Talion not to wear it today, and to make sure no other staff member wears theirs either. Under the effect of domination, Talion complies instantly without resistance. Realizing the situation, Dowd understands that he has already been targeted by Galdir, and is now deeply entangled in the main storyline. At this point, leaving the restaurant is no longer an option. Just then, the leader of the Purifiers, Galdir, steps forward and welcomes the two of them. System notification: main quest. The villain intends to recruit you, respond wisely. Galdir requests a private conversation with Dowd. Elnor initially refuses but reluctantly agrees after Dowd whispers something in her ear. Once alone, Galdir asks if Dowd understands the reason for his visit. Without hesitation, Dowd bluntly exposes the truth. He reveals the plan to resurrect a demon using the chaos of the full moon festival. Taking advantage of weakened security, he describes gathering demonic energy through bloodshed, releasing monsters, orchestrating assassinations, and spreading terror across the city. Galdir is left completely stunned by the accuracy of the accusation. Pressing further, Dowd declares that the goal is to awaken the demon within the Tristan bloodline. He exposes the assassination attempt on Elnor and the monster outbreak as part of the scheme. Revealing everything, he states that the entire plan has already been reported to the Chancellor. With defenses now in place, Dowd calmly asks how Galdir plans to respond. In that moment, Galdir realizes why the Prophet favors Dowd so highly. Behind his harmless appearance lies a dangerously sharp mind. Unable to hide his admiration, Galdir acknowledges Dowd's cunning. Yet with confidence, he claims there is one flaw in the plan. Before he can finish, he declares that Elnor is already in his hands. Suddenly, the door bursts open as Elnor kicks it down without hesitation. Galdir is left speechless as his supposed advantage crumbles instantly. It is revealed that his subordinates had taken her to a waiting room. They claimed demon worshippers would arrive soon and encouraged her to release her frustration. Hearing this, Elnor's expression turns completely cold. Citing imperial law, she declares demon worshippers can be executed on the spot. Without warning, she slams one of them onto a table with overwhelming force. The others immediately draw their swords and rush to capture her. Dodging their attacks effortlessly, she takes down two in quick succession. With a single slash, she eliminates two more without hesitation. Charging forward like a storm, she spreads fear among the remaining enemies. Another swing of her blade cuts down several more in an instant. Terrified, the rest abandon the fight and flee for their lives. Watching the aftermath, Galdir stands frozen in disbelief. Calmly, Elnor wipes the blood from her sword using her arm. System notification: Elnor favorability has surpassed the intimate level. Thanks to your influence, her unstable mania has greatly improved. Turning to Dowd, Elnor casually states that today does not count as a proper date. She demands that he make it up to her another time. System notification: exclusive quest activated. Gideon Latristan has taken an interest in you. Confused, Dowd wonders why Elnor's father is now watching him closely. Even so, he feels relieved that this ordeal is finally coming to an end. At that moment, Galdra suddenly pulls out a glowing red object. Recognizing it instantly, Dowd realizes it is a demon essence. Alarmed, he cannot understand why such an item is here. Reacting immediately, he signals Elnor to stop him. But everything happens too fast to prevent. Before anyone can intervene, Galdra swallows the essence. Declaring that divine grace had descended, a massive explosion erupted. The Eyes of Twilight, the famous date spot, collapsed instantly. The entire structure crumbled into ruins. Debris scattered everywhere as dust filled the air. From within the wreckage, Dowd slowly crawled out. Lifting his head, he faced Galdir, who had transformed into something no longer human. A monstrous form radiating terrifying power. Dowd calmly states he never planned to use the Prophet's gift. But now that it has come to this, he questions Galdir, asking if he can truly defeat that body. He quickly realizes what stands before him. This is a demonized form, created after absorbing demonic essence, granting partial demonic power. A shocking reveal this early in the story. A system notification suddenly appears, ordering him to defeat the Purifier, warning that if casualties rise, the mission will fail. Galdir declares the beginning of purification, his voice echoing across the terrified crowd. Then he takes flight and leaves the scene, abandoning chaos behind him. The situation worsens immediately. The fallen worshippers begin to move again, their bodies twisting unnaturally. They rise as monsters once more. No longer human, the threat rapidly escalates. As panic spreads among the people, suddenly beams of light strike the monsters, piercing through them with precision. The one responsible is Talion, who has just arrived at the scene. He confidently names his attack, Lethal Piercing Stab. Looking around in confusion, Talion questions where the monsters came from. Dowd quickly explains the truth. They were once his companions, now transformed into something else. He warns him about the necklace, saying the same fate would have happened to him if he had been wearing it. Dowd tells him clearly, if he does not want to witness hell on earth, he must follow his instructions. Talion immediately asks what to do next. Dowd answers without hesitation. Their priority is to protect civilians and stop the Marquis. Talion cannot hide his admiration, noting how calm Dowd remains, even in this situation. But Dowd cuts him off, telling him to evacuate quickly. There is no time to waste. Every second matters. Elnor observes everything carefully. She realizes something important. Asking if Dowd already knows where the Marquis is, he confirms that he can mostly guess, explaining the behavior of demon worshippers. they all share the same goal: to spread despair and chaos. Before summoning their demonic sanctuary, known as Pandemonium, Dodd concludes there is only one place Galdir would go. And at that moment, Galdir is already there, preparing his next move. Standing before the protective barrier, Galdir gathers his power, planning to destroy it. Even creating a small crack would be enough. It would still count as progress. He prepares to strike, but suddenly he is interrupted. Dodd's voice calls out to him, stopping him mid-action. Galdir turns in confusion, unable to understand how he was found. Dodd calmly explains. He simply predicted his actions. Elnor carries Dowd on her back as she rushes forward at incredible speed, closing the distance in an instant as they arrive before Galdir, who immediately sneers upon seeing them and mocks their arrival, claiming they have delivered themselves straight into his hands and that all he needs to do now is kill Dowd and capture Elnor. And as a member of the Tristan family, she refuses to doubt him, choosing instead to trust him completely and stand her ground without hesitation. Without wasting a moment, Elnor launches forward and strikes, her blade cutting through the air with deadly precision as she aims directly for Galdir. But he completely ignores her attack and locks his focus entirely on Dowd, relentlessly chasing him as if nothing else in the battlefield mattered. Unable to fly, Dowd is forced to rely entirely on his agility, narrowly dodging each incoming strike as Galdir unleashes attack after attack, each one powerful enough to kill instantly if it lands. Yet Dowd continues to move with precision, staying just barely out of reach as he reads every motion. Galdir pressure intensifies as he continues his relentless assault, his attacks raining down without pause as the ground cracks beneath the force of each strike. Seeing even the smallest opening, Elnor immediately takes advantage and unleashes two waves of sword energy, both slashes crashing into Galdir and dealing significant damage as he is forced to stagger, creating a brief moment of opportunity within the chaos. The battle quickly evolves into a chaotic three-way pursuit, with Dowd running at the front while Galdir chases him relentlessly with killing intent, and Elnor follows closely behind, striking whenever an opening appears, turning the battlefield into a constant cycle of pursuit and attack. Dowd continues to evade every strike with perfect timing, his movements sharp and calculated as he maintains control of the situation, but in a single critical moment his footing slips beneath him, causing him to lose balance and fall at the worst possible time. Galdir instantly reacts to the opening and unleashes a devastating attack aimed directly at the fallen Dowd, the sheer power behind it overwhelming as the air itself seems to tear apart, making it clear that a single hit would be enough to end everything. With no time left to escape, Dowd lies on the ground as the attack rapidly closes in, Galdir confident in his victory as the killing blow descends toward him, the tension reaching its peak as the moment of impact draws near. In a flash, Dowd activates the Holy Shield, yet even that radiant barrier fails to fully withstand the overwhelming force of Galdir's strike, the impact crashing through with brutal intensity as it nearly drives him to the brink of unconsciousness, his vision trembling as his body falters. But before he can fall, Elnor steps forward without hesitation, placing herself in front of him as she urges him to retreat, volunteering to remain behind and delay Galdir, whose lips curl into a cold sneer as he declares that both of them are already within his grasp. Yet Elnor's resolve does not waver as memories flood her mind, recalling how Dowd had helped her time and time again, and now she realizes that this is her chance to finally repay that debt. The system echoes within her, vitality rising, necklace durability increasing, stamina surging as her strength grows, and she lowers into a firm battle stance, ready to fight Galdir even if it means her death. But just before the clash begins, Elnor suddenly blurts out a strange and unexpected question, asking Galdir if he thinks she is a good match for this man, her words catching him off guard for a brief moment as he pauses, slightly stunned before letting out a mocking laugh, replying that she does make a good match, and that if they both survive, perhaps they should start a little family together. Yet his response brings her no satisfaction, as her expression sharpens, and in the next instant she moves with flawless precision, executing the Tristan swordsmanship as she engages him in a fierce and relentless battle, blades clashing with explosive force as Galdir quickly notices that Dowd has already left the area, clearly acting on another plan. Far from the battlefield, Conrad and Percy finish clearing the remnants at the Eyes of Twilight, while Elia quietly reflects on how fortunate he was to follow Dowd's advice and avoid this catastrophe, knowing that to dismiss it as coincidence would be far too unlikely. At the same time, Dowd begins to recover his strength, everything now hinging on Elnor, holding out just a little longer so that the tide of battle can finally turn in their favor. Yet, without warning, a sudden and terrifying shift occurs. Elnor collapses beside Dowd, as if her strength has been forcibly taken from her, and in that same instant, a violent surge of demonic power pierces straight through Dowd's chest, the shock of it freezing the moment as Elnor witnesses the scene in horror, unable to comprehend what has just happened, and in that critical instant, Dowd activates Deadly Charm, locking his target onto Elnor Tristan as the world itself distorts, color draining away until everything is reduced to black and white, the system flickering wildly as signs of chaos begin to appear. Then, from within Elnor's body, something unnatural begins to manifest, a horned woman emerging slowly into view, her pupils pitch black and her ears sharp and alien, her presence suffocating as she stands before Dowd, revealing herself not as Elnor but as something far more sinister,